Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We're very grateful to have you here. I'm Reed Price. I'm the director of the center and hosting today Something to Talk About, which is a regular program here, a podcast that we do a couple or 3 times a week. You can find out what's coming up by going to biseniorcenter.org/calendar. And Something to Talk About is sponsored by Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers assisted living, independent living, some memory care solutions, and they are interested in having you come and take a visit. They have day stay and respite care programs. If you'd like to get a tour, ask for Randy or Jamie to give you a show around. They'd be glad to treat you to lunch or dinner too if you want, or just check out their website, fieldstonecommunities.com. A lot of kerfuffle here in our neighborhood recently. Divisions of perspective about the reading of a play called One Family in Gaza. It's challenging to sort out how to have conversations about world events without triggering fear. So with that in mind, I thought that, the view from Frank might be helpful to help us see another point of view from those who have been protesting the idea that the play needed to be canceled or moved. So Frank, with that in mind, I welcome you to the program. Of course, you're president of Kol Shalom. There are many different Jewish denominations, and there are many people who are culturally Jewish who don't associate with any specific denomination, and there are lots of organizations. So I'm not certainly trying to ask you to represent, quote unquote, the Jewish perspective on this, because as there have been for centuries, there are as many Jewish perspectives as there are Jews.
Yeah, thank you. Or maybe one Jew, 2 perspectives, or 3 Jews, 2 Jews, 3 perspectives. Yeah, and I appreciate you making it clear that my own views don't represent those of the people in congregation called Shalom. This is a very difficult topic because it involves free speech and free expression. And personally, I'm not opposed to airing that play because, I think that's very important. What is very difficult is how do we express our perspectives? Is in both the current events involving Gaza and the wider events, the wider issue of Palestinian rights and the Palestinian nationalist position and the narrative associated with it. This is very, very difficult. Talking about about anti-Semitism and the relationship with this conflict, that eternal question: if you are, quote, pro-Israel, or I should say anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian, does that constitute being anti-Semitic? Where do you draw the line? And it's a fuzzy line. I think it's important then to recognize then the paradox. The paradox is this, is that over 40% of the Jewish population in the world lives in Israel. And so Israel itself, the future of Israel, things concerning Israel are inextricably linked to being Jewish. even if we wish to, we really cannot separate ourselves from Israel, regardless of, how we view Israel, or Israel's as being the Jewish homeland or not. We still are very concerned about it and the safety of the people there. Now, so where do you draw the line? And it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult because one can be certainly concerned about the status of Palestinians and what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in the West Bank, all that. But at the same time, being concerned about, well, the safety of the people of Israel and the future of Israel in any form. And so where do you draw the line vis-a-vis concern over the safety and the security of the people in Israel? And what constitutes a threat? What constitutes anti-Semitism? My own personal belief is that I think all of us need to recognize how we represent ourselves. Are we supporting peaceful coexistence, or are we simply standing on opposite sides, yelling at each other and repeating the same polemics and the same narratives that have gotten us nowhere? Do we really support the ideal, the principle of peaceful coexistence, or are we supporting a zero-sum game? Now, I've got to say that when I see the words "Free Palestine" or hear the words "From the river to the sea," what I'm thinking about is the last 100 years. What has Palestinian nationalism done? Okay, you have the ideal of Palestinian independence, self-determination. That sounds wonderful, but how has that how has activism to support that cause been manifest? It has been manifest by acts of terrorism beginning 100 years ago. This is a very well-established precedent. And so when I see the activism today and the words and the rhetoric, it's a deja vu. And I see it as really a wolf in sheep's clothing, that, it's represented as, the rights of indigenous people against the colonial settlers, the imperialists, et cetera, fits into that rhetoric or that narrative. But then how does it manifest?
So I just want to talk a little bit about the challenge, obviously, of in this brief call trying to tease out the long history of the tragic triangle of Palestinians and Israelis and other world groups trying to work out this. So the situation right now is one where Israel, the state, is involved in a very aggressive attempt to wipe out Hamas. I think that's safe to say. And there's a tragic amount of other deaths that are happening. And there are people who are understandably across the world upset about that. And so they're working as, I would say, anti-war activists to speak up to try to persuade the Israeli leadership, the government, to rethink the way they're prosecuting this war. And, those voices are coming not only in this country, but also in Israel. I read an article just the other day about reservists who are complaining about the military reservists in Israel, complaining about the way the war is being prosecuted. So you mentioned a few words. I wonder if there are ways of speaking or ways of promoting, if there are particular phrases you mentioned. Free Palestine is something that sounds like it, to your ears, presupposes a position that is, strongly against maybe where you stand. Are there words like that trigger?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's a real paradox, because there are those like me and those that represent, say, over 70%, I understand, of Israelis who want to end this war, who see it as something that is has no end, it's been brutal, it's been antithetical to Jewish values, and that there's but my objection to those who are who represent the quote pro-Palestinian position, that is conflated. The objection to the war, the outrage over the war, is conflated with the standard rhetoric of Palestinian nationalism. In other words, that Israel is illegitimate and needs to go away somehow. And that is the problem. And I think that that is actually counterproductive. You don't want to throw the baby away with the bathwater. I think it's far more constructive for all of us who are opposed to this war, who strive for peaceful coexistence, to actually speak with one voice, and not one that is opposed to the legitimacy of Israel as Israel.
Now, I did not. I was unable to attend the play, but looking over the materials that I saw online about it, it looked to me like it was focused on a family story. It was not focused um, on the larger sort of geopolitical, long time, our tragic tale of thousands, hundreds of years that we were just talking about. Certainly the last 100 years. Are those kinds of conversations? Is that a good way, from your view, to have those conversations?
Um, I think that addressing the humanity of everyone involved is important. And I personally would not object to such a film or such a play. Why not? I mean, this is the story. And in fact, this approach across the board, that addresses the humanity of everyone involved, is, I think, a step in the right direction. Again, that needs to be the focus, and not on the standard polemics. And in the case of the quote, of Palestinian nationalism, the from the river to the sea, any means necessary, free Palestine, all that stuff, it only exacerbates the position. We need to address the interests of individuals who live there. And my question to people who support the Palestinian nationalist narrative is, okay, you believe that Israel is an apartheid, illegitimate state, needs to go away. What do you advocate doing about it? When I was going to college, I remember hearing it was the expression, Zionism needs to be dismantled. The Zionist state needs to be dismantled. so gentle. You just dismantle it, take it apart, bolt by bolt, and establish an alternative leadership, and everybody will be very happy. But that's not really what happens. You have to deal with what you've got. And I would urge people to abandon that, that narrative, those polemics that have not served anybody, and instead to join organizations, especially those in Israel, that are actually support Palestinian rights, support peaceful coexistence, and also, of course, support films and plays that address the lives and the stories of individuals across the board,
Right.
not just those in Gaza, but those in Israel, those who
Well, and
had
certainly, I
suffered
think,
from the
yeah,
attacks.
yeah,
We
I
have to
certainly
come together.
the outpouring after October 7th would be an example of those stories certainly being told, and um, the experience that we're having now with terrible attacks on innocents in this country that are being aligned with violence. And I would say that that's activity that is unfortunately conflated with people of good conscience and good spirit who are trying to do exactly what you are talking about. Wendy
exactly.
Jones has her hand up. Do you have a comment that you'd like to get in here with?
Very much so. Frank and I have a long relationship. I was a member, for those that don't know me, I'm Wendy. I'm Jewish, and I formally quit Kol Shalom 3 months ago. But Frank and I and the congregation, I was a member for 20 years. And Frank and I have had individual long conversations, especially at the beginning of the war when I still thought there was room for some open communication at Kol Shalom. And he tried and we tried and we had lots of talks. And Frank would do what he's doing. Well, no, actually, he was much more easy to talk to back then than he is being today. There is so much to unpack from what you said, Frank, so much. You right off the bat are equating on and on, over and over, pro-Palestinian are terrorist. You said that in so many different ways by saying free Palestine. Frank, this isn't even who you were. We had these beautiful conversations where you actually saw the dehumanization of Gaza and the hate that was there. And now you're not even there. I mean, you are not even, you've stepped back. This is upsetting. But
okay,
let's
well,
move
Wendy,
ahead. But I
yeah.
want to move ahead to now. Sorry. Okay. So I want you to know our play, there was 150 people there, 125, excuse me, maybe 150. And every bit of it was positive. This play's been shown 3 different places. So equating pro-Palestinian as terrorists, we have had a year and a half of peaceful, wonderful protest and sign waving at the corner. So equating us with terrorism is awful. You also
Wendy,
made a
I don't know
statement
that,
of.
Wendy, I'm sorry, I'm going to mute you just so I can get in here.
That is not true. That is definitely a misrepresentation.
So, Frank, I'm just going to get in here and say that that I think Frank was pretty clear that he thought the play was the kind of activity that would be associated with positive conversation. He said that directly. And so I don't think that he was accusing you of being terrorists or exhibiting hate speech. But I mean, am I right, Frank? Ask to unmute, please.
Absolutely, that's true. Yeah, I support that. Let me again reiterate. I consider myself pro-Palestinian. Because I'm opposed to the cycle of violence. I am opposed to the dynamic that has kept this going for literally 100 years, the Punch and Judy show. And as I say, behind all this, and I'm not talking about plays that really show people's lives or films. I'm talking about okay, what are you going to do about Israel? what does free Palestine really mean? I mean, there are many Palestinians, but where is Palestine? When you say, and this is my challenge to you, okay, what do you mean when you say stop the occupation? Where is their occupation? Is it the West Bank? Is it Gaza? Or is it the whole enchilada? And in fact, in pursuing the Palestinian nationalist rhetoric or narrative, which I understand is, hey, you occupied our land, you took our land, you expelled us, we want it back. That is, am I correct? That is essentially what the position is. And I think that it's important that that you express clearly what exactly is meant by, free Palestine. What is meant? What is pro-Palestinian anyway? Is there a unified, I don't know, doctrine or position that you can state simply to all of us?
Okay, Frank. Now I'm going to let Wendy respond to your comments.
Oh, geez. This is so hard because this is so upsetting. But I'm going to take a very deep breath and be very articulate. When you say things like the word free Palestine, the river to the sea, these things are stuff. All that stuff, that is demeaning. It's demoralizing to our movement. I'm a proud Jew. I very clearly can continue to be a proud Jew, knowing that I will not support what Israel is doing and everything and all the abuse. It is as a good Jew, it is my duty to humanize and think of everybody when I think, sorry, I am not being articulate because I'm so angry. But this rhetoric of everything you're saying is so truly saying that being pro-Palestinian is anti-Semitic, it is against Judaism, is so wrong. Read the Washington State Human Rights Commission put out beautiful statements in April 2025 that's very articulate about conflating anti-Semitism, pro-Palestinianism with anti-Semitism. You need to educate yourself. Everybody, I'm speaking to Frank because I'm just so upset because I used to have so much respect for him.
Excuse me, but I'd like you to answer my question clearly.
Read which one? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. There are common mottos associated with the pro-Palestinian movement as it is. Can you explain what they really mean? I'd like to know. I'm not playing
I'm
games
exactly
here.
doing that.
What does free Palestine mean?
Means we want to stop a genocide, though. This is the worst human rights of our generation violation in our world. And Gaza is just, everybody can agree, it's horrible. But this is what we need to fight that. Being pro-Palestinian says that these people have a right to their culture, they have a right to their homeland. And that is what being pro-Palestinian from the river to the sea means. Give them back their land. I'm not going to even go about my feelings about Israel. That's not important. You're asking me a direct question about Palestine.
Well,
every human rights organization in the world has said this is
with that, but
you're not
saying
to know
it,
Frank.
But sure, I am for everybody's rights. I mean, but specifically, I mean, this is all about what you're opposed to, which I certainly understand. My question is, my question is, and this is the key question, is that I think basically we are aligned, but it's how do you get there? When you say free Palestine, where is Palestine? What is the Palestine that you are referring to? Is it a place? Is it a people?
Oh, it's a place, a people, and a culture. And I'm going to ask Dee, as another Jew, to talk to you about it too.
Okay, the next person who has their hand up is Beth. Eisenhood. So I'll let her go, and then Dee, you can come after that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to speak not as a Jew and not as a person who understands the complexity of the history of the Palestinians. I am not in support of what the Israeli government is doing in this war, targeting non-combatants and the incredible cruelty of denying food, etc. But why I came today was to talk a little bit about, or listen a little bit about the art museum controversy. I felt, and maybe that is much lesser importance than the topic we've been discussing, but I would like to say, I think the museum missed an opportunity to talk about the role of art in the community, in a culture. And the role of art, I think, is to present many different points of view, not just one point of view. And if they had said, we're not taking off this play, people will be safe in the museum because people apparently expressed they didn't feel safe. And I would like some explanation of why. But at any point, if they had been able to say, we are putting on the play, and this is why, this is the role of art in a community, I think it could have been a teachable moment. Instead, they aligned themselves with what I saw as fear and kind of denigrated the role of art and turned away the play. But that's what I came here to today. I realize all of these things are important, but I would appreciate someone speaking to this issue of turning away the play. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know that there's anybody here from the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, but there may be people on this call who were urging the museum not to stage the play. If there is, we'd love to hear from you if you have an opinion. Frank was basically indicating his support of this kind of programming.
Right.
Dee?
Okay. I have never met you, Frank. We have not got a relationship. In a way, it makes it easier. So I'll just say I'm a Jewish member of Havara Shir Hayam, and I've been around these parts for about 35 years. You are going to get the long view with me, Beth. I'll apologize because I'm not going to speak to the museum specifically. But I want to tell you how I came to believe what I did, which is I am Holocaust survivor family. I grew up in very anti-Semitic north of Boston, New England in the 50s. I had a real education in what it means to be a target of anti-Semitism. All right? When I was in college in 1967, and that war, the 1967 war, the Six-Day War, happened, and Israel took land, and soon thereafter, the first settlement happened in the West Bank. And I remember that day vividly because I heard it, I immediately disliked it, and I also flashed forward because the trajectory of taking more and more land was clear that that was how it would go. And in point of fact, that is a short version of how things have evolved. Now, I believe it's possible to be pro-Palestinian and also a supportive Jew, and even of Israel, not of these current policies, which I abhor and feel actually point the way to the destruction of the heart and soul of the Jewish people. If I could sit Shiva for an entire country, I might be doing it now. I'm that anguished over what they are doing. And I believe that it's the best Jewish value to support the underdog, to be compassionate, and to see Palestinian people as people. And if I believe that, then it's led me to support the Palestinian freedom movement. Well, they're going to have to coexist there. The Jews are not going to disappear. But the bitterness of what they're doing to those people is something that's going to take generations to overcome, if it can be overcome.
Now, Dee, when you talk about being the recipient of anti-Semitic bias. And I'm just wondering, do you think that there's an understandable sensitivity when certain words are used, maybe not the ones that
Okay.
Wendy and Frank were
I
going
think
back and forth about, but as a non-Jew to participate in this conversation,
Mhm.
Yeah.
are there ways to be clear about that distinction
Well,
between
I-
between being anti-Semitic and being against current Israeli policies?
here's what I have tremendous compassion for the Jewish people. They're a traumatized people. That in generational trauma of the Holocaust is something that has made people hypersensitive and fearful. I know what it is to live in a place and feel like you're not really rooted there, that at any point you can be booted out of there because that is the history. But the unfortunate part of that is that it makes one very quick to perceive oneself as a victim, as a potential victim. Ironically, I believe it is what Israel is doing right now that is in part responsible for the upsurge in anti-Semitism. So that's one thing about it. Another point is that it's been weaponized. Unfortunately, it has become a tool to suppress, shut down, render silent opposing points of view. And this is terrifying in terms of free speech, democracy, right? I don't want to hijack this meeting, but
No, I think that was a helpful
right.
another point of view context here.
Let me mute
JJ
myself.
Blackwood has had an arm up for a little while there, so go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name's JJ. I guess in looking at the topic of this one, it's a local discussion of anti-Semitism, and there's a lot going on in the world with the overall history of, the tragic triangle for the last 1,000 years. But kind of getting us back towards the topic of this talk, we've heard about the play and how it was I mean, it looked like it was just a story about a family in Gaza. And of course, all that gets wrapped into it, but it was very much here's some humans and going through a rough time. And it didn't seem anti-Semitic. And I understand that people were concerned about it being at the museum. How do we humanize each other? How do we drive towards peace when some of the viewpoints just aren't even allowed to be spoken about, like with the play? I guess I'm wondering, and maybe this is more a question for Frank and some of the other members online here, but how do we, if the topic of today's discussion is anti-Semitism in the local area, but then when we look at this play, it's a story about a family, how do we reconcile those things? And is there anti-Semitism going on that we need to be aware of? I guess how do those two things all relate here? The title of the talk and the play and the viewpoints and not being able to see things. Yeah.
I think that's a good refocus, because our goal here is to figure out how we can and what forums are the right places for us to have honest discussions, because I definitely have also heard that people that Jews on Bainbridge have experienced anti-Semitism. I don't think, based on what I've heard, that was the case in the presenting of the play. Bill Luria, you had your hand up.
Okay. Again, I don't want to get into the Palestinian-Israeli issue directly, because I think the topic is anti-Semitism. And as I see it, there are 4 stereotypes of Jews that are foundation of anti-Semitism in this country and maybe all over the world. Jews are seen as having too much power and influence in business and Wall Street and the media and science and the arts. As we spoke before, Jews are more loyal to Israel than they are to the United States. Jews are too clannish. We tend to isolate ourselves in our own little clannish way. And fourth, we choose money over people. And these are the tropes and stereotypes that I think over history have defined where anti-Semitism has evolved. And how we deal with that, it goes back thousands of years. But I think those are the four main elements that spur on anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Frank,
I
yes.
agree. Yeah. I think it's very important, actually, always to understand where the lines are drawn. One can criticize, certainly, the present policies of Israel. And you can even criticize Israel's very existence as the Jewish state. In other words, Zionism. People do that. And that is not necessarily anti-Semitic. Where the line is drawn is anybody who advocates or carries out threats or violence against Jewish people because they are Jewish. That's pretty straightforward, I think. That when you have, for example, someone targeting a synagogue with graffiti, and the graffiti is, anti-Israel. Does that constitute anti-Semitism? Because they're attacking Israel and not Jews, right? Wrong. It's a Jewish institution, and this is an act of violence. It is a threatening act, and that constitutes anti-Semitism. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think that there is a problem, though, in again, in crying wolf and calling things anti-Semitic when they really aren't. Yes, graffiti is a threat. Graffiti is, in a sense, a violation. Maybe not physical violence, but then you could say that that insulting people or threatening people vertically is still a threatening act.
Verbally.
That is anti-Semitism. We need to draw the line and be very clear. The same thing on college campuses. When those are protesting what's going on in the West Bank or Gaza, the actions of the government of Israel, then that is, I think, legitimate. But if associated with that is calls for violence, and that's what I say, like free Palestine from the river to the sea, by any means necessary, these are common mottos. Now, that to me is a threat to Jewish people, call for violence. And that to me, I would consider anti-Semitic. And of course, it doesn't help anybody. So that's what I say, is that A, we should draw the line and be very careful about that. And B, I think it's important too that we really examine our speech and our position. Is it something that promotes peaceful coexistence? I mean, across the line, or does it just keep the violent dynamic going?
And I feel
think
as
those
though
are the two principles.
Yeah, and I feel as though based on the way that the one family in Gaza played out, it was more of the latter. It was more of a open conversation, and maybe there were some who feared something that it turned out not to be. So we also have to be patient to some degree, I think, with each other as we move down these. I know that when I've been in discussions about inclusion on a number of topics here over the last several years, we are going to sometimes make mistakes in the way that we communicate, and it's important for all sides to try to be patient with each other and ask for clarification. Wendy and Dee both have their hands up. I'll go brief, and Bill.
Yeah.
I'll go briefly to Wendy and then Dee and then Bill.
Thank you.
Oops, I'm sorry, I muted you. I didn't mean to. Forgive me for try again.
Uh-oh, I hope that didn't mean anything, Reed. And I'm not going to apologize for what I said, but I just apologize for losing my cool. This is so deep in my heart, and I feel it so passionately. And it was so dramatic for me to have these problems with Shalom. It was just so upsetting. So I'm a little more under control, took some deep breaths, all those good things to be able to talk a little more sanely. Having Dee there to say exactly what I wanted to say that I did not articulate well. But when we talk about moving forward, having some open discussions, that's what we need to have. That was not something that was able to happen at Shalom because I really wanted to talk to my people. I wanted to talk to Jews in my congregation about this issue. And it had to happen at one-on-one lunches, and this sort of thing is how I was able to get support from my own community. Then I found a wonderful community in like-minded Jews, anti-Zionist Jews, and I do identify that way, yes, and I'm proud to say that because in my head, I can totally separate it out. I would love to see an open forum, Reed, with not just having, by having Frank as your first guest, that was upsetting to our group. Because we do know there is, if not Frank himself, there are members of Kol Shalom actually on this call that have said we don't want the play, okay? And we don't even know if they've been doing that all along because we tried to have some movies, at the Linwood, and they went beautifully, but others that were also shut down. So having people not be passive aggressive, having it all on the table is what we need to happen. And that's why we were really hoping that the end of the play, that we would, the playwrights there. And I said, oh, good. This is an opportunity for folks at Kol Shalom or other naysayers, whoever they are, to actually ask questions and don't hide behind a box. Say what your problem is with this, and let's have that conversation in public in this beautiful forum when we have people educated about what is actually happening in Gaza.
Okay.
So I'll stop there. That's hopefully what I wanted to say. I am calmer now.
Okay.
And I really would love for you to continue, though, not Frank, Reed, to think about having other guests on this podcast, because I know these are saved in YouTube. So I'll
Correct.
relinquish it.
And Dee, do you have a comment?
Actually, Wendy said some of what I had in mind to say, so I'll.
Okay, and then Bill Luria.
Bill, you're muted.
Bill, now you're
Okay.
you were muted. Yeah.
Right. I think, originally I thought the topic of discussion was how should we deal with the anti-Semitism that's pretty flagrant now in our country. It seems always to devolve into one of the main issues in my mind of anti-Semitism, and that's the support or non-supporter of Israel. So I was hoping that we would spend more time figuring out how do we deal with the anti-Semitism that seems pretty rampant in this country. We could get into big discussion a little later how much I'm opposed to what people call a free Palestine. I have no idea what that means. Does that mean you support a Palestine that supports honor killings and forced child marriages and imprisonment and flogging of gay people and even female genital mutilation? Some of the things that Sharia law that Hamas preaches is out there. If that's what you support, I don't support a free Palestine, but I want to talk about
So Bill,
anti-Semitism here in this country.
So Bill, I would say that your expression there of a number of accusations against all people who identify as Palestinian
I did not say that. I said Hamas and their charter.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't hear that, but in any event, I think that that's an example of what maybe Wendy and Frank are both talking about the need to have a calm and extended discussion about, okay, tell us what you mean. Wendy did talk a little earlier about what she means when she's talking about free Palestine. But to see if what you're getting at is something that is what you think it is on both sides of the divide, and that's where we started, is a divide rather than trying to get on the same page as often as we can. So so to me that's our goal today was really to talk about the fears of anti-Semitism on the island, and whether there was a sense that the staging of one family in Gaza was on its face an anti-Semitic act, which was certainly not the view of the people who were staging it. But I did get some emails that indicated that some people thought that it was. And so that's where we got here. Anyone else want to weigh in at this point? Yes, Frank, you're
Yeah,
back on.
just another to speak to that point. Again, we're talking about anti-Semitism, how to recognize it, and how to deal with it. One to that point, it is counterproductive, I think, to oppose plays such as this and movies such as this. I think what happens is that those who opposed the play and its staging, they saw, who was sponsoring it, and so they automatically assumed, okay, well, this is to advocate for the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian position. So they conflate. So in other words, they didn't see it for just what it was, which was a play about, a family's life in Gaza. That in fact it was associated with this organization that they are opposed to, and that was the problem, I think. It's a paradox, because when you stand up and you oppose something like this, a play or a movie, or like the movie that was shown at the Linwood, which was fine. I mean, a documentary about people's lives in Gaza, is counterproductive. Then it's saying, okay, we're opposed to something that is, art, or it's an exposition of people's lives. That's all it is. And then framing it in a different way, saying, oh, this has got to be anti-Semitic, this is anti-Israel, probably because of its association with the organization that sponsored it. I don't have any answers about that, other than we have to be very careful not to just be reflexive in opposing anything that represents, quote, the other side. And again, that's part of the dynamic that I think we all are best served in opposing, the standing on one side, shouting at those on the other side. But in fact, it's far more constructive when we find common ground.
So I think we're going to leave it there. I think this has been, useful. I also feel like it's only the beginning of a conversation about how to make connections. And the Senior and Community Center here at Bainbridge Island on the Waterfront Park is interested in being a center for community discussion. So don't hesitate to reach out, and let's continue to look for ways to make connections and to try to really hear each other. Thank you very much. And with that, Beth, did you have something you wanted to say before we closed off?
It's done, Beth.
I just want to thank you for doing this, Reed. I thank you for making the center the place that the play could be put on. And I thank you for beginning this kind of forum. It's exactly the role that we need in the community.
Big
Thank you.
amen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I thank you all for showing up today and being willing to do our best to communicate.